Share a little bit. We are pleased to be here to share a little bit more to help support you in your work with families when it comes to bullying. And we know that things have definitely changed over the landscape of how children are both treated and how children treat others over the course of um, the last several years. So we hope to give you some tips and tools that will help you help families know better, do better, and feel better. So as you were thinking about those previous bullying experiences, if you feel comfortable, just kind of wondering what your thoughts are and what your memories are of those experiences, please feel free to share in the chat, or you're welcome to unmute and tell us what is something you remember most about that experience. We'll give you a couple minutes to type or unmute if you wish. I personally can remember back when I was in I think it was late middle school, probably 7th or 8th grade, and there was one older boy in my middle school who just was relentless about teasing me about all sorts of different things. And finally, one day out on the playground, he took my ball, and I was playing, foursquare with some friends. He took my ball, and I chased him down, and I took him down. And I got in trouble for it, and I remember being punished for that at my Catholic school. But I remember also thinking, you know what, this is a kid who that kid had been teasing me and making fun of me and doing things to me for so long. And I finally had had enough. And I ran after him and took him down because he finally just had drawn the last straw. And I was the one who got punished from it. And I felt like, you know what, this is injustice, right? So that is one kind of situation that stands out to me. Thank you to Denise to share. I was bullied because of my weight when I was younger, and how sad that feels, right? How sad, how isolated. A few years ago when I was working in an elementary school, I had a very model citizen, model young man in 5th grade, student leader, volunteer, helper, great student, kind. And finally, one day he ended up in my lunch detention. And I was like, his name was Marcus. And I said, Marcus, what are you doing here? Like, what? And he said, you know what, Miss Ellsworth? He said, this kid has been constantly bullying me, teasing me, making fun of me. And he said, I've done all the things you've told me to do. I have walked away. I have told him to stop. I've been with a friend. I've talked to my parents about it. I've ignored him. And he said, finally, I just told my parents, if he pushes my last button, I'm just going to pop him one. And Marcus said, so that's what I did. I popped him, and here I am ready for my consequence. And I'm in lunch detention. And I thought, wow, here's a kid who is really making an intentional choice. And, here's an interesting comment about that story is that a few weeks later, I said to Marcus in the hallway, I said, Marcus, how's it going with this kid who's been, who was bullying you? And he said, I'm sad to say it, Miss Ellsworth, but he hasn't said anything to me since. And I thought, oh no, am I promoting, this going after a kid and getting revenge? And really that's not. And we want to present to you today that there are lots of different ways that we can help support parents and kids in managing some of those bullying situations, empowering them with skills and strategies. So we thank you for sharing. And Sarah, thanks for sharing. Dreading going back to school. Hard to focus, absolutely. And just that fear, right? That fear and that worry and that it really limits you to your sense of freedom about where you can go and what you can experience, and kind of always being like on high alert. And which we know about stressful and traumatic stress right now is that those are some things that can definitely impact us. So we're happy to be here today to share. So a little bit about us. I'm Angie Ellsworth. My background is in education as a dual licensed social worker and school counselor. I currently am the owner of Timeout Behavior Coaching, which provides in-home parent coaching and behavior training to teachers and staff in the 11 county region. Most of my training and behavior management and consulting is through the Southeast Service Cooperative. So after COVID, I left education just feeling like I really was limited in how I could impact families and some of the cyclical situations we were seeing at school. And so I decided that to go kind of grassroots and get back into homes and try to help offset some of those patterns of behavior right at the grassroots level. I'm a wife and mom of three emerging young adults, and certainly we've had our experiences over the years with challenging relationships and trying to navigate those things. I'm pleased to have one of my parent coaches, Anna, joining us today in this presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Angie. So my name is Anna Schmidt. My background is also in education. I spent the last 10 years as a classroom teacher in the Rochester Public School District before meeting Angie and moving to join her on her team. And so I spent now the last year as a parent coach going into people's homes and working on some of those tough situations with them. I'm also a mom. I have just one child. He is 7, going on, I don't know, 37 maybe. He keeps me on my toes. Very energetic child, very curious child, and just an absolute light in this world. A quick note before we start. So like we just said, Angie and I are parent coaches. Really, our field of expertise lies in helping parents, coaching them through tough situations in life. And so the information we have for you today really approaches bullying from that lens. And if you are professionals who are working with families, we just encourage you to share this information with them if you think it would benefit them. And we're presenting it today in a way that we would present to families. And so just take what might be useful for you or for your families. And then we'll provide you with some additional resources at the end.
Lots of things to consider when we think about what is going on in the world and how many factors influence our families and our children. We are on the outgoing end of the global pandemic. We also see that there is a lot of social unrest and civil injustice in the world, and kids are exposed to this at numerous ages and numerous ways, right? Social media, conversations that are happening around us in our homes. We know that kids are influenced by a lot of just exposure to songs and the news and social media. We also know that online or in-person bullying is still continuing, and we'll talk a little bit about cyberbullying and what that looks like a little bit more. And actually what research is showing is that that tends to be one of the more popular. It's growing in its number of experiences and that people are having with cyberbullying compared to in-person bullying, and why that is. And then looking at what the research majority says about how we are managing our emotions, how we're able to cope with adversity, how do we utilize some of these life skills, these soft skills, and uh, conflict resolution and critical thinking, problem solving skills to really manage what we're going through in the world and what we have to and what we're dealing with. We do some of those, we do all of these things with developmental appropriateness in mind. So there's so many things to factor when we talk about this topic with families, and it's not just that your child is being bullied. It's looking at all these other pieces that impact how they are coping with many other things in their lives.
Okay, so let's start by defining bullying. I know for me in the classroom, I would often hear kids say they're being bullied, but it wasn't always bullying. So let's just take a look at what bullying is. So starting with conflict, conflict is something that happens occasionally. It's not planned, it's in the heat of the moment. 2 or more people are involved in some kind of argument. When there's conflict that occurred, all parties are upset. Everyone involved is upset. Everyone involved wants to work things out. Everyone who is part of the situation has something they'll need to accept responsibility for, and can work together to solve the problem. And it can usually be resolved through mediation or conflict resolution with or without adults. Then we move to teasing. So teasing is still happening occasionally, a little bit more intentional, but still happening spontaneously. Unprovoked, one-sided, and can cause hurt or upset feelings to the person who's being teased. Teasing is often based in thoughtlessness, impulsivity, or really a lack of social skill. The person who did the teasing can usually accept responsibility after having time to process the situation. Their behavior will likely be regretted, and working with an adult to come to an agreement to stop the behavior usually does stop the behavior. But again, adult intervention is likely needed. Um, the person who is the cause of the teasing would usually benefit from some social skill building. And it's not something that we should ignore as adults if we see. And then finally, bullying. So bullying is different from the other two because it is repeated and it is over time, over and over and over again. It is happening and it is planned and it is done on purpose. The person who is being bullied will feel deep emotional pain or even physical hurt if the bullying is physical. Um, and it's happening because the person who is bullying is looking for a sense of control and power over the other person. And you'll likely see a, a pretty extreme difference in power between the two people. The person who is doing the bullying will hold more power than the person who is being bullying. So in school, that often looks like somebody who's more popular doing something to somebody who is less popular. So some kind of conceived notion of power. The person who is being bullied is often blamed for these actions by the one doing it. There's something quote unquote wrong with them. The person who is having it done wants it to stop, right? The target does not enjoy this, but the person who's doing the bullying, because it gives them the sense of control, wants to continue the actions. And this usually cannot be resolved through simple mediation. Even after mediation, this behavior might continue.
One of the key pieces when we talked about parents, when we talk to parents about true bullying, right, is that oftentimes as soon as we hear that our child is being, is in any kind of a conflict or having any kind of a, friendship issue or being targeted in some way, most of us have our mama bear, emotional response to it, to this situation. And we often will kind of be like, well, this is bullying, this isn't right. And we might jump to conclusions. So when we talk about really trying to help parents identify like what truly is going on here, in order to do that, it's really having a conversation with your child and coming at it from a more curious mindset to do a little bit more exploration of, well, what was happening? What was going on around you? What did anybody else see or do? What, and just kind of digging into that. So we've got some prompts, but helping define this almost always helps parents understand with a little bit more of emotional control. Like there are other stages that we are in before we get to what we may believe is true bullying. And that takes a little bit of time to explore as well. So as you look at kind of this, you can kind of see that that is a progression of some, being able to work it out, kind of happening together. And then we get into some more intentional, and then we get into really some more of that targeted and individualized behavior. Most of us know that typical bullying can look and sound like a variety of different things. We know, and most families are aware of physical bullying, right? The threatening of, I'm gonna take you down. I'm gonna beat you up. They use intimidation. They use proximity. They use just really presenting themselves in a way that shows mean and powerful behavior. Maybe it's, intimidating or threatening people by posturing, walking by and giving a look, that kind of thing. Verbal bullying is also, calling names, making rude comments, microaggressions, any kind of a piece that makes somebody feel negative based on the words that they're using. Relational bullying is really quite really what we see most happen, what research shows is happening most often in middle schools, but now we see a downward trend of that happening in as early as some of the data is spiking in second and third grades, where we see a lot of relational bullying in girls, and they are cliquey and they are possessive. They are really more of this, you can't play with me, you can't be a part of our group, we're cooler than you are. A lot of that kind of relational bullying, ostracizing, clicking, and it's getting younger and younger and younger. And I don't know the research about this. It doesn't say anywhere that I've found that proves it, but I believe cyberbullying is really related to that and seeing an increase in the bullying, the other kinds of bullying based on cyber use and social media use. And cyberbullying gives people a freedom to be able to say and respond to things and post things that they don't have accountability for in the moment. So it's really a way for people with low impulse control to be able to just spout out whatever they want without really thinking of the repercussions. So oftentimes that cyberbullying is really and it's easy for people to be able to do it, but it's a lot harder to control and a lot harder to monitor. And we often, as parents, don't realize how much of those types of that kind of feedback and that kind of information our children are getting because we're not monitoring their devices and their content as thoroughly, maybe as we could be. So some other dynamics about just some cyberbullying. According to the 2022 Minnesota Student Survey, 50% of students reported not knowing who bullied them. So cyberbullying and thinking about, well, that's just 50% of students not knowing who bullied them. So how many kids are really being bullied? And the research showed that almost 70% of students across the board were being bullied through cyber or reported that they had at least one experience of cyberbullying, but they didn't know who was doing it. So how do you go to school and feel like you're in a safe and secure and comforting place when you don't even know if the person walking next to you is the person who sent you that nasty message last night? There's also a lot about that disinhibition when it comes to cyberbullying, and parents don't really often understand that. They might question, like, why would kids say that? Why would kids do that? And it truly is this: if you can't see me, I can't see you, and nobody's going to hold me accountable. Cyber bullying is also accessible 24/7. It's not just that their child is getting bullied at school anymore. It's not just on the bus. It can be all the time. And if we think about the amount of this, the intensity that this exposure can have for kids and their self-esteem and their mental health, it's a pretty significant issue. Most kids who are experiencing cyberbullying don't report because they're afraid. I don't want my phone taken away. I don't want my mom to know this is happening. I don't want parents to know. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to be the rat. And they are just afraid, and they'd rather take it because their phone is so valuable to them. And then bystanders for cyberbullying are a little different because they don't really witness actual face-to-face confrontation. There's no witnesses unless it's a group chat or unless it's passed on to somebody, it's kind of comes down the chain. But it's really hard to empower other students to do something, to stand up, to speak up, because they don't have the context of being in a social situation. And what we do see too is that if there are bystanders in person, that they lack the courage to be able to stand up and say something or do something. They'd rather pull out their phone and record it so it's on video so everybody else can say something or do something, or at least make sure that it's shown about what is happening. And they're more interested in what is happening than doing something about what is happening. Oops. I'm not very good with my animation. All right, Anna, go ahead.
So first, let's talk about some signs a kiddo might be being bullied. And I think it's important to recognize that just because you see some of these signs in a child, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are being bullied. However, if we see this, if we see some of these things, it is a sign that something could be going on, and it's worth checking into and digging into a little bit. So a sudden avoidance or fear of going to school. Maybe your child used to love going to school and now they don't want to. A kid who is reducing their own screen time or acting differently after being on their device. They were on the internet for a little bit and then they came down and were in a terrible mood. Frequent health complaints, headaches, stomach aches. I can't do this. I can't go there because I don't feel good. Changes in eating, maybe all of a sudden starting to pick at their food or binging on food. Sleeping habits, not sleeping at all or wanting to sleep all the time. Withdrawing or losing interest in school or activities. They don't want to go do the same things they used to. It might be because somebody is there that has been causing them the stress. Really big feelings or up and down feelings. Sad, moody, anxious, depressed, withdrawn, feeling helpless or hopeless, unexplained injuries, coming home from school with bruises or injuries that are more than what we would usually see on kids who are active, or lost items or missing items that can't be explained. Increased irritability, more short-tempered, because they're hurting, it might come out towards you. So what can parents do to help? And this is probably where you would come in, because if you are that professional working with families, this is the advice that you can offer to parents who are worried that this is happening to their kids. Angie already touched on this a little bit, but we don't want to over personalize it. Hang on to that mama bear feeling. We're going to hang on to our emotions about it, because one, we don't want to make it about us. It's not about us. And two, if we have really big emotions about it, one, it can rub off on our kids, but then also they might avoid coming to us in the future because they are trying to protect us from having these big emotions. So we're going to hold on to our own emotions and instead just ask a lot of questions, listen, get as much information as you can, and empathize. So we're going to say things like, I'm sorry that happened to you. It's really not about you. It wasn't okay that this happened. I'm here for you, things like that. We're also not going to go the opposite direction, right? So we're not having big emotions, but we're also not going to blow it off as if it wasn't a big deal. If our child is coming to us and has deep feelings about something, it is a big deal. And we know that because they're feeling it. So we're going to listen, again, empathize a lot. We're not going to ask questions like, what did you say or what did you do to them? No victim blaming here, just again, seeking to understand. We also want to avoid feeding the fire or encouraging them to retaliate.
Okay, some other tips that we encourage parents, right? Because oftentimes this is if a parent and child have the relationship where they can sit down to talk about it, then certainly we want to nurture that and we want to give the parents skills to do that. But many of us work with families who don't often have that kind of respectful relationship already. And kids may not want to talk about that. Kids may not want to sit down and or may not be capable of having that kind of a respectful or open relationship. So we encourage parents to really just observe and kind of try to pick up on some other cues. I like to say it's kind of reading between the lines, right? Like if your child comes home and says, oh my gosh, there's so much swearing that happens at middle school. Okay, now if I wasn't really in tune to my child, I might be like, oh yeah, like kind of blow that off. But what is my child really saying about that? Is my child saying they're being sworn at? Is my child saying that that kind of behavior is intimidating or threatening to them? What does that comment mean for my child? So when we think about kind of reading between the lines, what other cues can we pick up on that might help us put some pieces into this puzzle? And again, working with that parent to kind of say, okay, let's look for a few different pieces and look for patterns of behavior. Maybe you're driving your child to school and maybe they're texting to a friend or they're talking to a friend or a sibling and making comments about, well, I don't want to go to that class, or so and so didn't want to come home or didn't want to go to class today because of this. And you start thinking about, okay, well, if my child is talking about their friend who isn't whose behavior is changing or isn't coming to school, then what is going on with that friend that my child may be exposed to? So again, we're looking at this big picture of, even if my child isn't being bullied, does my child feel threatened because their friend is, or because they see it happening and they're afraid to go to school? So again, being aware of that bigger picture. When you are able to kind of nail down that there are some things happening, using some strategies and really talking with your child about how they can be empowered and how we can help them build their confidence and being able to solve the problem or address their own personal needs in ways that they're both comfortable with. I'll go back to Marcus and his story in the beginning, where Marcus did all the things. He tried all the appropriate solutions to solve the problem, and it didn't work for Marcus. And so after talking to his parents, he's like, if I have to take this into my own hands and I know that my choice is going to equal a consequence, I'm willing and I'm capable and ready to accept that consequence. So really, when we think about encouraging our child's confidence, is we have to equip them with tools and how to do that. And we've got some resources that we can share with you about that. So some of the things that we encourage parents to do, if they have any concerns whatsoever, like, we are concerned, We're not even really sure yet, right? But we're starting to see some signs. We encourage parents to start documenting things immediately. And you know what? The phone is the best place to do that, because on your calendar, you can, I encourage parents, I'm like, you just pull up the date and you make a little note that says, first issue. And in the little attachment where you can make notes, I voice text like what's happening. And there now I already have a record, right? Documenting incidents that may seem little, because if they're little now, but you're starting to see that there's these, I'm not really sure what to make of this. I'm not, I believe in parents' intuition. So if a parent is starting to feel something and things look a little off, and there really seems to be no other explanation for what's happening, include those details, start documenting, take screenshots if it is cyberbullying or issues, encourage your child, have this proactive conversation with your child and say, hey, you know what? If you ever see anything like this, if somebody is doing this to you, or you see somebody, in a group or something, take screenshots. And I remember having many of those conversations with my own children, because that's serious stuff. And it can be scary to kids to see that and then not be willing to share. And some of the biggest fear comes from conversations we don't have with our children. So even though it can be uncomfortable for parents, with us, with you, being able to help guide parents through these conversations, and encouraging kids, like if you are just transparent with your child and say, if something like this comes across your phone, and, if you share it with mom and we talk through it, there's not going to be a consequence, right? Being proactive and saying, I would rather know and have no consequences than rather have it be hidden and have it blow up later and then have tons of consequences that often will have bigger risks. Um, Contacting people that are involved in your child's life, if it's directly related to them. I know in our experience with schools, it was so hard to manage cyberbullying for sure, because if it happens outside of school, we don't really have the capability of managing it in school, but it often spills over into school. Kids bring these emotions, they bring these issues. It's constantly there, whether it's cyberbullying or in person, so being able to really gather a team of people to be able to say, hey, can you keep an eye out for this? I'm not really sure what's going on here. Um, and, but certainly take what your child is telling you to truth. My child is telling me this, right? And giving just the parents that phrase to be able to say, you're going to call the school and say, my child is telling me this. Can somebody look into it? Or can somebody get back to me about what other people are seeing? And getting other people's feedback, because we want to certainly take our child's information to truth, but we also want to be mindful of, okay, what else is happening? Oftentimes it's really difficult when you're working with families who say, well, it's the other kid's fault. The other kid is doing it. My kid didn't do anything. And they take this defensive stance of, my kid is perfect and my kid wouldn't do that. And we really want to be able to help guide our parents into seeing those differing perspectives and getting that information again from that curious standpoint. So consider if you have a relationship with the other parent and if you should contact them. Now, this one I don't always recommend. Some parents don't take that recommendation and they they go after the other parent anyway. It often does not result in any kind of a solution, because that, they're going after them with their mama bear. They're going after the emotion and not the facts. So even in a situation that I had to deal with one of my children, I had to say, and I knew the other parent, and I said, here's what my child is telling me. Here's how I'm going to address it with my child. What you do with this information is up to you. And I left it at that, because I wanted that parent to know that I knew that this is what I was being reported. Here's how I was going to encourage my son to deal with it. And if that parent wanted to take or leave my information, they could, but I wasn't going to get involved in anything else. But I worked that solution out with my child first and said, hey, here's something that here's, I think, something we could do. Are you comfortable with me saying this? Are you comfortable if we work through it this way? And my child was in agreement with that. So considering those details on what are some things a parent can do right now, definitely that documentation is key. One last thing for me on this slide, responding to that bullying behavior. There's 3 Ps that I like to encourage kids to use too. And so this is really kind of empowering both for parents to learn and understand, and also then to teach their children. So the first one is to prepare. And I mentioned just a second ago about being proactive. Preparing kids that helps build their confidence. What tools and strategies can we give them? And one of the ones that I love is just giving them a comeback line. And it's not meant to be retaliatory. It's not meant to be aggressive or bullying back, but it's really meant to empower a child to be able to say, you know, when somebody says something mean or nasty to you, oftentimes it makes us freeze, right? Because we're unprepared. So a comeback line could be something like, thanks for your opinion, and walk away, right? Or maybe, yeah, I know. That's too bad too, right? Or your shoes are ugly, or your hair is ugly, whatever that might be. You could be like, yeah, I don't really like my shoes either. Thanks. And when you agree, right? When we teach kids that if we just agree, it de-escalates the person and loses their, loses the power of this imbalance. So role play situations are also really powerful. We will often work with parents on this. We've got some role play cards that we do. We make it a game and we just kind of say, okay, let's just pretend this is happening. We do that a lot more with sibling situations than maybe we do with bullying at this point, but role play situations is really valuable. We often will share with parents, like when you're driving in the car, kids have a really hard time, like kind of expressing or explaining what they would do, but they have a really great time associating what somebody else should be doing, right? So we can kind of make it about that. And I would always say, oh, my friend group, one of our family friends, his kid is really dealing with a tough situation right now. Gosh, what would you guys do if you were in that situation? And we make this association that other kids are going through things too, and we normalize that other kids are working through challenges. And so, wow, if what would you do in that situation? And we use that role play and opportunities to talk about that even when we're driving to soccer practice or coming back from a game. Another tool we'll share with you is called a choice box. And this really helps kids kind of use a visual charting tool to decide, what are my 3 choices and what are the good consequences and what are some of the bad consequences that would happen if I chose that option. And we really encourage students to choose a bad option, right? Because if they see the comparison between good choices and bad choices and good outcomes and bad outcomes, then they have a perspective from which to make their choice. Oftentimes we teach kids that you have to make a good choice, good choice, good choice. But then they fail to see that what is the outcome of a bad choice. So this choice box is a tool, a visual tool for that. And then try 3, which is my little way of saying, here's a list of interventions that you can try. Try 3 and come back to me. If you try 3 of these interventions and they don't work, come back to me, come back to the adult, and we can talk through what some of those next steps would be. So really using some of those tools to prepare a child and build their confidence, and then come up with a plan. What is it that you're going to say and do? And be explicit. What are you going to say when this happens? Where are you going to go? Who are your safe people? Do you have to duck into this classroom? Do you have to, run to the bus driver? Is it happening in your neighborhood? Who do you talk to? So really talking through an explicit plan and allowing that child to feel like, you know what, if this happens, I know what I'm going to do. I know where I'm going to go. And how am I going to do that? So that also encourages their confidence and their ability to say, you know what, this is my plan. And then when you set up that plan, you get those people involved in that plan too, right? So if you're going to duck into this room, if you're getting bullied between social studies and math, and you know that on that path in your school building, the science room is open, then let's talk to the science teacher, right? Let's get that person involved and be like, hey, listen, if my student just ducks in here for 5 minutes, this is why. Can you support that? Yes, absolutely. So those are some key things that we encourage with that collaboration if we do know that things are happening at school as well. And then really teaching a child that not only are the skills to be able to do it, right? Like we know what we should say and do and how we should do it, but the posture to really show that confidence as we help them build those skills. We want them to stand up straight. We want them to use eye contact. And again, I coach in a strong, calm voice. I don't want kids to be screaming, yelling, angry, or sometimes even crying, right? And we practice this, and most kids kind of find it really quite comical when I say, I said stop. and I use that calm, strong voice to model. And then often I'll say to kids, I'll be like, well, that's not really strong enough. And then they'll kind of get a little, they kind of smirk, and I'm like, no, I want you to be stronger. Like, pull your shoulders back, put your chin up, and really having them model what that feels like, because a lot of kids and, honestly, parents don't have the the experience in maintaining their composure in a calm and strong, assertive way. So those are the three P's: prepare, plan, and use your posture to really show that, you mean business and you want this to stop, but you do it in a controlled way.
So then let's talk about, I guess, role reversal. What if my child is not being bullied, but is the bully? So here are some things you can look for if you are concerned that your child or a child you work with could be a bully. Are they experiencing difficulty fitting in? Maybe they have a lack of social skills. They don't know how to relate to their peers. Are they excluded from activities? Are they not invited to things their peers are being invited to? It might give us a clue that these skills are getting in the way of them building friendships, or maybe they are taking advantage of the friendships they have. Does the child look or act differently? Have they been bullied themselves? Hurt people hurt people. So if a child has been bullied or experienced this hurt, they might turn around and search for control in a power and control by being a bully themselves. Have they experienced a recent traumatic event like divorce or loss of a loved one? And I think it's important to note that what is traumatic to one person may not be traumatic to another. And so truly, anything that happens out of the ordinary can feel traumatic to a child. And so just understanding that a change in behavior after some kind of change in life is super common and can send a child into this spiral where they are acting differently or seeking control in maladaptive ways. Or have you seen bullying behavior at home, even without friends around, towards siblings, towards you in public, with kids that you don't know at the park? Have you seen them act in a way that is threatening and controlling? And if you see that, it is a sign that they could be struggling at school as well.
A couple other things on that, making this can be a really hard conversation to have, because we know that if your child is, could be maybe the instigator in some of these, having a kind and calm and clear conversation with your child that, what's happening is this, it's not okay. And, they're looking at what is my child, what needs are my child trying to get met by using some of this, the behavior that he or she is experiencing. And so how can we as parents kind of hold our child accountable for this, right? So we talk through with parents about like non-physical and logical consequences when rules are broken. So, you're, even if it's within the home with siblings, you keep pummeling your brother, right? So guess what? Now we're not going to be able to do this. We use we talk through what that can look like in their homes. And if we have families who are using physical punishment, then we talk about what are your children saying and seeing. You're telling them it's not okay to hit, but then you're using hitting as a means for punishment. So that's really like, let's try to have our words and our actions match up. And then really focusing on trying to rebuild that student's self-esteem and their self-confidence by offering praise when we do see that positive behavior. So really to focus on the positive and offering praise. We talk a lot about your child is reaching out and trying to show that they have needs that are not being met. What is it that those needs are? And we talk about the function of behavior a little bit in appropriate parenting terms, but really it boils down to your child is asking for attention. They want you to notice them. They want to spend time with you. And certainly that looks different in different developmental stages, right? An adolescent is not going to come home and say, Mom, gosh, I wish you would just sit down and, sit on the couch and talk to me for 2 hours. And, certainly that's not what's going to happen. But what does that quality time look like with your child? Maybe it is truly when they're home for 15 minutes in between school and running to practice or going to their friend's house. You put down your phone, you look them in the eye and you say, hey, how was your day today? Tell me two great things that happened. Or on a scale of 1 to 5, how fine was your day? Because we all know that that's kind of the common answer for, hey, teenager, how was your day? Right? Fine. Well, on a scale of 1 to 5, how fine was it? Because if today's a 3 and tomorrow's a 1, we know then that something happened today, and we can use that as a reflection. So yesterday you said it was a 3, which is a pretty medium day, but today's a 1. What happened? Or what made today a 1 compared to yesterday a 3? And we can use that, what I like to call the fine scale, and we can use that as a way to kind of check in and spend that quality time, even if it's only 5 minutes. It shows that that parents are really engaged and invested. And especially if you put your phone down and just say, hey, you know what? I want to know how your day was. And then you can always follow up later, right? At bedtime or maybe even the next day, but then also focusing on building on your child's talents. And there's a lot of social comparison about who's good at this and who's good at that, and really helping your child identify what their gifts and strengths are, and really encouraging them to explore those, providing exposure to your child for lots of different experiences that maybe they could be like, oh, well, this is something I never thought of. Oh my gosh, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be an artist, or let's go look at this, this event that's going on in town, just to expose them to different things to help kind of build their awareness of what the abilities and capabilities are for them to be able to grow and learn with their unique talents. And then again, collaborate as much as possible. We have school staff on here, but as you know, it's really important to collaborate with all the family's providers, working together to provide additional resources and support. Sometimes we just like really look towards, oh, my child's being bullied, that now they're depressed, and okay, let's just medicate. And sometimes we can find that a collaborative approach with some other tools and resources, and with supportive people around, keeping an eye out for that child, really making a connection with that child to be able to say, you know what, I got your back here. I'm not gonna, let you kind of go on your own on this. Um, Several families I've worked with have felt really, really strongly about the support they get in these situations with the school staff. It doesn't always work though. And I say to the team, it's not for lack of effort. School staff and you as case managers and skill providers and social workers, everybody puts forth a lot of effort, but bullying is a really hard challenge. It's a complex issue to be able to solve. And so it's not for lack of effort that people aren't trying, but it certainly can be for lack of effectiveness, where what we're doing is just not effective in the situation. And sometimes we have to look at alternative things that, might seem pretty extensive, but sometimes moving a school or moving a full schedule around, or looking at different alternatives to really help our child feel the safest they can in that environment. And I know some families who have regrets that they said, you know what, we just kept saying, deal with it, we can do it, just man up, kind of pull up your bootstraps, try to ignore it. But that's not always the best option. And kids are really, if this is a serious issue that kids are really being targeted, or they are showing this kind of behavior, how can we really reach out to people around us to look at some creative ways to help address this issue, where not only the child who may be the victim, but also the child who is experiencing the feelings that make them want to feel like they need to bully, really can be, their needs can be nurtured as well. Okay, woo. That was a lot. We realized that we gave you a lot of information in about 45 minutes, but Anna is going to post in the chat a great resource tool sheet that we have for you. It's got links for adults, for teens and tweens, for younger children. It's got resources. It's got some of those tools that I spoke about earlier. Let us know right now. Yeah, we definitely have time for questions. We'd be happy to share uh, any more resources or questions, or like kind of what ifs that you're thinking about if you're utilizing any of these strategies already, and finding that, you know what, this just isn't working. What if, and this would be a great time for any of your additional feedback as well. Maybe we just overwhelmed you with too much information. Maybe another question then would be, what are you all seeing in your direct work with families? What are you seeing as, like some of the common themes? Is bullying coming up in your work with students and families? Is that, or are you seeing it in different ways? Are you seeing, um, other kind of exploitation or power and control? Um, and how are you helping families manage those things?
Have a quick example, I guess, of the probably most egregious bullying that I've seen in my work, which was two 15, 16-year-olds. And one was like posting on, like, made an account specifically to bully a peer, would like post pictures of their house and say, if you see this person, beat them up. Um, and we felt like there was really no route to take. These peers didn't go to the same school. Um, so school wasn't able to be very helpful. It worked on trying to get a like restraining order against this other student, and that ended up being really difficult just because it was two minors. Um, yeah, so it felt like there was really no recourse for how grave this incident was.
Yeah, Abby, and I think that's one of the hardest parts, right? Is when we have situations like this, it's not for lack of effort, but it certainly is that lack of effectiveness. And it's such a helpless feeling when this continues and continues. And it seems pretty drastic for families to like literally change their whole, their whole environment to address this. And there are times when sometimes those drastic measures are really what is maybe the only thing that can change that trajectory of where this is going. I go back to really helping to empower the student, right? Empower the child and the family to be able to control what they can control. We can't manage what other people are doing or saying. We can manage our response to it. We can manage the tools and resources we're using to help support ourselves in that process. And there are times when you do feel helpless, and I know as a parent, when my family was struggling, when my kids were struggling with things, I hated it when people said, well, you're doing everything you can do. And but nothing is changing, right? So then you're kind of like, well, now what? And definitely that the course of trying to get legal, services involved, and um, you know, the justice system involved when it comes to making a referral to the police department, reporting things like that. Um, Changing profiles, locking down your phones, using parent involvement apps where teenagers aren't going to want you to be patrolling everything on their phone, but in situations like this, I strongly encourage it. Using some of those monitoring devices and services that can flag when some of this stuff happens and can track where it comes from. um Nowadays it's so easy for kids to hide stuff on their phone and to be able to make those anonymous accounts. And how do we educate kids ahead of time to be able to have these conversations when they first get their phone? How, like, let's develop a contract on what we expect when the kids get their very first phone, and what are some of those things that we can work on to say, you know what, when these things come through, we need to talk about it. This is what our expectations are as a family. What values do we put on a device and social media? And a lot of those things are really deeper conversations and deeper systems that are affected. And oftentimes we haven't had all of that work. We don't do all that work with our families beforehand until something like really serious like this happens. And not that it's too late, but that we have a lot of back work to do. So kids do feel safe and comfortable coming to someone to say, this is what's happening, and what can we do about it? And then saying, we're going to turn your phone off. We're going to take that phone and put it away so you're not exposed to that stuff. That in itself is a huge challenge with families, to try to limit their child's screen time, or to do it in a way that the child is monitored in case something does come up. And parents really we have lost a lot of our power and control in that because, I mean, those are battles that a lot of parents don't want to fight to take their child's phone away or to restrict their screen time. But again, we don't know the exposure of what kids are all getting and what that does to them until sometimes it can be overwhelming and too late. Thank you for that question too, that example.
I did have another quick question for you. I'm wondering if you have resources because um, I'm younger and I still feel really overwhelmed with figuring out how technology works, like how to be able to monitor your child's phone. Because I know there are a lot of different ways you can do that or like restrict their internet access and those sort of things. But I don't really know how to do it, and I suspect that's common. Like parents will ask me in my role, like, how do I do this? And I don't really know. Do you have a resource for teaching parents how to do that stuff?
Yeah, well, and certainly other people feel free to jump in if you know or use something that you feel is effective. When my kids were little, I had great luck with what was called the Guardian app. And it was a fabulous app that even across devices, like my kids had iPhones and I had an Android, but I had the primary account app on my phone. The kids had the app on their phone. And anytime that something, I could set the parameters for what came through on their device. And anytime something was flagged, I would immediately get a message. I would get a screenshot of the picture that maybe was received. I would get a flag of certain words that were flagged and sent through on text messages, on Snapchat. Like it was pretty amazing. And I loved it. My kids, in fact, hated it. And then, once they got to a certain age, of course, then we had already had several of these conversations. And so once they got to a certain age, we took the app off and I didn't feel like I needed to monitor their phones as much. And then depending on like who you have for phone providers, I know that Verizon has like a family management plan. There's the Disney Circle used to be popular, a few years ago. Those are the top three that I can think of that were specific to like my family and my experiences. Other families have used different things based on, iPhone or their service provider, but anybody else curious about or have experience, maybe personal experience with some of the ones that they've used?
I have a family who uses the Life 360 app, and that is a little different because it's more like location based, but that could be really helpful if you're concerned about a kid getting um or being confronted like on their way home from school or something. That gives you, I think, live tracking data. So you could kind of watch them on their way home from school, make sure they're safe, that kind of thing.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. I like that one too. Um, Alyssa says in the chat, in your role as a childcare provider, okay. Provider who is struggling because it's the parents who are essentially bullying each other and then it bleeds into her program. Oh yes. That is unfortunate for the children, isn't it? You know what? That's a really great context that when we think about bullying behavior in general, we often think about is that happening from kid to kid, but you're exactly right that when kids get caught in the middle, if it's parents who are essentially bullying each other, or they, are acting like that or trying to pull other people into the middle. Definitely I really encourage families when we have, especially when we do a lot of co-parenting coaching, and parents who are involved in maybe divorce or custody battles. We really do a lot of that, making sure that we're setting boundaries of what expectations are and that maybe that provider would be able to say, and validate first is my advice. Validate first by saying, it sounds like this is a really important topic to you, or it sounds like, this is a pretty charged, situation, and then set that boundary. Thank you for sharing, but I'm not going to get into it. This is not my role to be involved in that. And it's really hard to say that, but if I've found that if you validate and acknowledge first and you say, this is really important to you, I can understand where you're coming from. It's not my place to be involved in it, or I'm sorry, I really can't get in the middle of that. It allows you to still provide that empathy and that understanding, like, yep, I can see that this is really hard. sorry, it's not really my place to get involved. And and just by saying that, and then I encourage people who might not have the, the total confidence to say that, is to just go brain dead with that strategy and just keep repeating it. I do hear you. I'm sorry, it's not my place to get involved. And then we have to kind of teach them that distraction strategy, right? Then, okay, well, now let's get your kids in and let's get over, have a great day at work. And you kind of try to, switch the subject or change the channel, and use a distraction strategy to kind of get moving past that. And that's a really hard thing to navigate because the information the parents might be sharing could be helpful to the provider and to the child, especially the child's behavior and what the child is hearing and navigating. But most parents aren't really that mindful of how that kind of conflict can impact the child. So as the provider, being a good model for that and saying, this really isn't something we want to talk about in front of the children, and this really isn't my place, then that provider can set boundaries that are both validating and empathetic, but also that just clarifies the provider's role. It's really not their place, and they shouldn't be involved in that in the first place. Anna posted in the chat, we do use a lot of resources from about relationships and conflict from the Gottman Institute, which is they're pretty phenomenal when it comes to dealing with communication and conflict issues among adults. And they just recently started a parenting department. So they really are some of the world leaders in communication between relationships. So that is a really great resource to share. Thank you, Anna. Yes, you're welcome. Any other questions or comments? Feel free to reach out to us. We appreciate being able to share a little bit just about, how a little bit about our work and what we're doing, but hopefully some of the information we shared can be valuable to you as you continue to work with families and help navigate challenging situations and empower the people of our community, because boy, everybody needs a little help here and there. So
there's one more slide, Angie, with
is there?
some
Okay.
QR codes for people if anyone's interested in connecting with us outside of this presentation. So we do have a private Facebook group. I think it's called Keeping Connected. And so there are a lot of parents who have taken courses with us or done coaching with us around there, but anyone's invited to join. Angie will often come across some kind of awesome resource and then share it there. And we're also working on building a mailing list. So if you'd like to hear more information about courses or community classes or community events, or again, some information that Angie finds, you can join the mailing list and then you'll get emails from her about that.
Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, for sure.
Forgot about that one.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I just want to say to everybody in the meeting, I'll keep it open a few minutes before we log off so you can grab those links and for the Google Drive survey and the Gottman Institute and get these QR codes. As soon as we end this, you will lose all that stuff. So don't leave without clicking on those.
Thank you for having us, Abby. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.